So for this function, we're going to find the inverse, and it involves a square root. It's a square root function. So we can write it as y equals 2 plus the square root of x minus 4. Switch the x and y. And the book might do it a little bit differently, but it's going to be the same steps. Okay, subtract the 2. And then you're going to have to square both sides to get rid of that radical. So it's going to be x minus 2 squared equals y minus 4. And then we'll have to add the 4 over. So x minus 2 squared plus 4. And that's going to equal y. Now, we need to talk about the restriction on this function. We'll come back to that. So I'm going to write f inverse of x equals x minus 2 squared plus 4. Now, the restriction way back up here, because it's a square root, there's automatically a restriction, right? So we know x, in the original function, x has to be greater than or equal to, well, let me write this out. Sorry. Oop. X minus 4 has to be greater than or equal to 0, so x has to be greater than or equal to 4. Okay, so we're talking about the function f of x. And we're saying x has to be greater than or equal to 4. That means the domain for f of x has to be 4 to infinity, right? What does it mean for the range? Now you could graph this if you wanted to. This is going to be a quadratic, I'm sorry, not a quadratic, a square root function. Now if you think about it, think about the square root function and the transformations that are going on. It should be moving 4 units to the right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 units up. So if you think about the transformations we were working on in 1.5, that's kind of what the graph would look like. What do you see as the range then? The range for the original function is 2 to infinity. Okay, and we can get that from the graphing and with the transformations. Now, if you're having trouble with the transformations, you could make a table of values as well. But this is a square root function, and that's what it would look like. We can't have any values less than 4 because of the domain that we talked about here. So it's got to be 4 or 4 or greater for the domain, and that gives us a result for the range of 2 or greater. Now, why do we want to know that? Well, in another video when we talked about domain and range, we said the range for the function is the domain for the inverse. So this right here, that's going to be the domain for the inverse. So you can say, I would just say x is, I'd probably do it in inequality notation. X has to be greater than or equal to 2. Okay? And you could graph those and see what they looked like. Anything else on that? They could write the domain for the inverse. They could say the domain of f inverse is, and then write it with the interval notation. Sometimes they'll do it that way as well. So, okay.